Thanks. Okay, it is now 5:30. I would like to call the October 3rd special meeting of the Board of Education to order. Roll call, please.
Should we do the pledge instead?
Oh, that's okay. Sure, we can do the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Bucher.
Here.
Mr. Herrera.
Here.
Mrs. Hauk.
Here.
Ms. Mayville.
Here.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Here.
Mr. Zicker.
Here.
All right, before we start the special meeting, as a reminder, our approved meeting norms and board protocol are provided for a reminder and a reference. Public comment. At this time, members of the public and employees of District 100 may make public comments. As a reminder, any person appearing before the board is expected to address the board only at the appropriate time and follow the directives of the board president to maintain order and decorum. Identify oneself, limit comments to 3 minutes, and conduct oneself abiding by board policy 8:30. Anyone wish to address the board? All right, hearing none. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the request for fundraiser for Belvedere North High School football team as presented?
So moved.
Member Herrera moved and member
Second.
Hauk seconded the approval for the fundraiser request. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Mrs. Hauk.
Aye.
Mr. Zicker.
Aye.
Mr. Bucher.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb. Ms. Mayville.
Aye. Next up, master facilities discussion.
All right. So this evening, I'm going to start by, I think, just walking you through the priority projects list that we have broken out for you, and then give you the opportunity to ask any questions that you might have or provide any additional feedback to us. So what we have done is broken out by site all of the different projects that are detailed in that 23 million of initial scope, and then also added in the other items that were a part of that initial scope, the Everest remodel, the clinic, and the Perry Tier 2 additional renovations that would need to be made there. So if you look through there, you can see the priority needs, and then where it says HLS, that's your health, life, safety. Non-HLS is non-health, life, safety. We don't know that these projects will qualify for health, life, safety. They are our best guess. We have some steps that we would need to take to secure that. However, that is with some confidence that obviously we put that out there for you. In the next column, you're going to see work time, which is the length of the project that we anticipate. That length of time is not including things like going out for bid, all of those steps that take place, but gives you an idea of exactly how long we anticipate that project's going to take once we have accepted a bid, it's gotten board approval. Then the last column there is the possible timeline. Again, today we're talking about years 1, 2, and 3, which we anticipate being years 2025, 2026, 2027. And this is how we might slate that work out in a way that makes sense and would be able to be completed. Okay, so that's what you're looking at here. If you page all the way to the end, you will see that Kishwaukee does have also that breakout, but it's important to note that the Kishwaukee costs are not included in this initial scope. They are an additional $1.4 million, but we are still waiting for a decision there on if we would go forward with that or if we would look to sell Kishwaukee in its current state. So we did not include those in that 23 million at this point in terms of priority projects. So then if you look down to the bottom, the totals will give you what we anticipate in terms of health, life, safety, which is just under 21 million, and then the non-health, life, safety, which is just under 2 million. But if you remember, we were talking about that figure of about $31.5 million for all the projects in the initial scope. That is when you also include the Everest remodel. And you can see there in the information in the board meeting what it is that might look like. Again, that's a sketch of what we're anticipating. We would sit down, should the board decide to move forward with this, we would be sitting down with Mr. Lascola and with our team to take those next steps. Same with the clinic, and then same with that Perry Tier 2 additional steps that we are looking at taking there. Once you add those additional pieces, you get to that $31.6 million. So here again, we are anticipating a total health, life, safety coming to $20 million, 20.7. Non-health, life, safety possible at 10.8 million. We do think some of those projects for Everest and that Perry Tier 2, for example, could additionally qualify for health, life, safety. But at this point, we are more confident in that 20.7 and would need a little bit more detail on that 10.8. At our last meeting, we talked about the fact that the district is willing to commit $2 million to get to that $31 million out of operational budget, trying to make that work for us. We additionally did some research on what we could do regarding utilizing fund balance. So we could go to DSEB bonds, all right, for that additional $10 million. That's certainly well within the scope and possibility during that first 3 years. However, if the district did not want to do that, so if you wanted instead to assume that full cost on behalf of the district, we could do that out of fund balance. That would be, again, about $10 million out of fund balance. Mrs. Armstrong has done some additional background checking on what the implications of that would be, but we are confident we would be able to also cover those costs out of fund balance, so without going to the DSEB bonds at all, if that was the choice that the board wanted to make. When we go to those DSEB bonds, that's when we also employ that 30-day petition period, so that also has some additional implications that I know the board expressed some reservations around, so we wanted to make sure you had all that information. Mr. Winters, anything I missed in terms of description of those projects and where we're at?
No, you did an excellent job. Yeah. Anything?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, Mrs. Armstrong, do you want to provide any additional detail regarding the fund balance?
Yes, just as a follow-up from the last meeting, I have been talking with ISB on that process of what it looks like with that ed fund possibility of a transfer. And so in the conversations, they have looked at the financials that are actually going to be presented to the board as a whole at our October meeting by our auditors. We would be able to transfer by resolution of the school board $10 million from ed fund to capital projects as a one-time transfer. It does require that resolution, and that would take from that $65 million that we have sitting in ed fund and moving it only to a capital projects fund, which would allow us to use it on these capital projects in the fund side there. That would not trigger a deficit budget reduction, which means we wouldn't be put on that watch list that everybody doesn't want to be on, because it does not equal over 50% of our operational costs. We would still maintain that balance in the ed fund, so we wouldn't have to do a budget reduction plan for the next 5 years to say how we're going to deal with the deficit budget, because it would in essence be adopting a deficit budget. We would have to amend our current budget to show that transfer from fund balance, but we are well able to do that. The impacts on our financial profile score, we are in financial recognition with a 3.9 score, and we would stay in that category up until a 3.54. At this point, without doing all of the projections, they don't think it will be likely that that will reduce our profile score into the financial review says, so we would probably stay at recognition, but we would see a small reduction in that profile score. And in the conversations with CEPL and PMA, talking with Bob and Ann again, with a decision to take a one-time transfer from our ed fund, that is likely not going to have a significant impact on our bond rating because it is completely justifiable that is going directly into our capital projects and it is funding these options that we don't want to necessarily issue bonds for those. So they feel that that is completely explainable. We would still be issuing bonds, of course, for the health, life, safety component of it, and that would be part of, this is the district's commitment, is also using the resources they have. With that said, just understanding that ISB and our advisors with PMA and Steeple, we are presently looking about 224 and a half days in our ed fund of working cash on hand. If we take $10 million out of that, that's going to reduce that cash on hand. So we won't have, another 200. Right now, with all funds, we have 256 days of operating cash on hand. If we reduce that by $10 million, that is going to drop that number lower, but it is not significant enough at this point when our expenditures are $104 million a year out of ed fund that it triggers that watch list. So it's just making a conscious decision that we would be reducing that number most likely for next year. It is important to note that with all of the ESSER funding coming in and those things, as we've had discussions here, we did add that $10 million to fund balance within the last 3 to 4 years. So putting it in over the last couple of years when we were a little more flush with cash, if we made options to take it out for this purpose, you can look at it in that way that it was just recently there and now we're going to take it out and use it that side.
Dr. Shook, I do want to say one small thing though, about this list. We made this up not that long ago, but in that short time, we've already knocked off about $235,000 of projects already on here.
Awesome.
So our wheels are always moving no matter what. So we're always thinking about the next project.
Thank you for adding that, Mr. Winters. And also, a board member raised the question of the track for North and the tennis courts
Yeah,
here.
they don't, that's not the right price, is it?
Well, it is what came back to us in the needs assessment. We know at this point that we anticipate spending more dollars on those as we've started to pursue them. But we kept the numbers from the needs assessment because as we spoke about at the last meeting, we know some of those numbers are gonna be high, some of those numbers are gonna be low. But to try to second guess what's in that needs assessment item by item seemed like it might be a little bit tricky. So we know there's gonna be some items that are gonna be higher in cost, which is part of the reason why Mr. Winters is highlighting. But we already have spent that $235,000. There's gonna be some movement on all of those things as we actually bid these projects out. And we just need to be aware. We've got an approximate bottom line dollar amount. That's gonna flex and move, and we're gonna be keeping the board informed of all those things along the way.
And those dollars in the needs assessment were presented last October, so we're already a year past those today dollar amounts there. And that offset is Mr. Winters has paid that $200,000 out of his O&M budget already. That enables, if we're saying, okay, this is what we're gonna be doing for health and safety, those dollars can be reallocated for a project that may come in a little higher.
And taking that real deep dive, such as the track, at the time, not really being aware of the grading issues and understanding that, you know what, we've got to push reset and start from scratch so we don't continually have this problem every couple of years.
And I would just also highlight, you may recall, we had the 3.9 million, I think was the projects that were already completed for the needs assessment. We saw that same thing. Some projects came in much higher than we anticipated, some came in much lower than we anticipated, but we wound up at pretty close to that same bottom line. So we believe that that will continue to be the case, but as Mrs. Armstrong pointed out, we're already a year past when we got these initial estimates. So we're gonna start to see those numbers push up in all likelihood.
Question for Joanne. Joanne, can you go back and repeat again the 10 million? If you take that out of the ed fund, right? Out of the 65 million and move it to the capital projects fund, it would not trigger a default or land us on the watch list for that?
Correct.
And that's because it's not more than 50% of the operational fund?
Yes, so when ISB took our current budget and the financials of our audited statements will be presented later this month, they did their little magic calculations and showed up that we would not trigger that. And of course, that would all come to you guys because we would have to do an amended budget, and you would see all the worksheets again that would identify where that is in the calculations of why that deficit reduction. It will say it's an unbalanced budget, but at the very top it says deficit budget, but does not require a deficit reduction plan because it doesn't meet the threshold.
And Joanne, did Ann, she looked at the 10 million, obviously, right? Did she look at anything more that could possibly be transferred out of fund balance? So, or maybe, we look at that equation in terms of the 50%.
So
To the
could we look at more
Yeah,
dollars?
I'm trying to
In
figure out
this
what the ceiling
initial-
is potentially
In
for
this
us.
initial 3 years, or are you thinking further down the line for some of those other projects?
We'll possibly further down the line, but at
Okay.
this point in time, what is our
Okay.
ceiling on that? Before we start impacting our bond rating, before we can start impacting the ISB financial recognition score.
Right. I did not dive into that. At this point, I was looking at how to offset what we would need those ESOP bonds for that 1 through 3 year initial scope. I would provide extreme caution in using even more. I mean, we need to be cognizant that if we're using all our reserves, we're coming into a time where the financial benefits that we've seen from COVID with lesser expenditures, with higher revenues coming in, higher corporate personal property replacement tax, all of those funding sources are huge. I mean, CPTRT went down 30% last year, went down another 30% this year. We are not going to be flush with cash as we have been for the last 4.5 years. So I would definitely not be making a recommendation that we go full on and take all of our fund balance. I think $10 million for an approved plan that we have, this is the scope, this is what we're doing. I think that is a prudent use to stay away from looking at those D-sub bonds and just issuing those health, life, safety, which would be approved in that side. I would be very concerned about reducing this too much further in that we don't know what's really coming, what it's gonna pan out to with the loss of the ESSER funds and the local revenues that are coming in. I would want to have a year or two to at least look at that before we start looking at bigger chunks of fund balance going.
But we can get some of those figures and some of those recommendations about what a minimum number would be and what those pieces were. I would certainly concur with Mrs. Armstrong that I think we probably want to look at years 1 through 3 and then see what our additional options would be, but we can find that information out.
I don't disagree with Mr. Herrera on that. I mean, I do think though that realistically looking at it, let's take the before ESSER time, before we got all that ESSER money. I don't remember us having a deficit budget for quite some time. I mean, at any time I can even remember. So I mean, I think I could go back at least 14 or more years before that and say, we never deficit spended then anyway, before we ever saw any ESSER money.
Yep.
So I mean,
But
we've been good.
Yep, I agree, and we will definitely take a look at it. I would remind everyone that the cost of inflation and our wages and our collective bargaining units have increased dramatically since COVID. So our increasing costs are going a lot with our salary and benefits, which were negotiated contracts. They have not even kept up with CPI. So even as we could do 5%, we were having larger than 5% increases in wages year after year for those collective bargaining agreements that happened post-COVID. So insurance costs are greater. I talked a little bit about our utility costs. So I don't want to rely just on what was happening pre-COVID because I think that we've seen a shift in the economic culture as well since COVID.
Thank you, Joanne. And so really, what I wanted to figure out what the ceiling was is, because I don't think to your point that you were making earlier, I don't think we're gonna be able to rely necessarily on fund balances. And we're gonna have to take a balanced approach with different approaches, with whether that's a DSEP or health by safety bonds. We're just gonna have to take a kind of a balanced approach of multiple methods to get there. But it'd be helpful to understand kind of what do we have, what's the top, before we start, before there's a bond downgrade or any shift in our scores for the financial recognition score from ISB, that kind of thing. So just good for us to know so that we're not that I'm intending to go to the ceiling on that, just good for us to know where is the ceiling, where are we at, and how can we do some balanced approach to this.
It will rely a lot on projections, so,
Yeah.
I mean, I will tell you, I am very conservative in some of our projections because I don't know what this post-COVID group is going to look like. So anything to move forward from what ISB and I have been able to talk through and really feel that feel very comfortable in saying, yep, this is what we're looking at. Then I'm starting to project what revenues are gonna look like for 26 and 27, and what our expenditures are gonna be looking like that. And we have we have 3 collective bargaining agreements coming up that will be negotiated in those 2 years. There's a lot of unknowns, so I will definitely dig into those numbers, but I will caution every conversation with, these are very preliminary conversations, is that we don't know what this year's even gonna shake out with. As we took some options, I did present you with a balanced budget, but we had some of those post-ESSER decisions that we still have to come back around to, are we gonna keep these positions, are we going to continue to fund these things?
And I think we also have to be cognizant too of the fact that, only because I got mine in the mail and I know a lot of other people did, and I've seen some comments online about it, is my assessment's gone up 34% the last 2 years. Now, I know that's not gonna cost me all of it, but it cost me $1,100 last year. And if it cost me another $1,100, that's $2,200 in 2 years. And I'm fine, I'm not arguing about, I'm not fine with that, but if there is gonna start conversation on that, because when people saw their assessments at 16.8 or 17.3, the levy can stay the same,
Yeah.
and your taxes are gonna go up accordingly, so.
And that's an excellent segue at this point, because I will be bringing you the preliminary levy for just informational purposes at the October meeting. Across the board in our tax district, the EAV increase was 13.9%. So we are seeing that EAV go up, but there's a ton of new property that they're saying is coming in. And those are some of the unanswered questions I have between now and what we're doing when we adopt that levy is, for instance, this is we'll have a conversation really next, in a couple weeks, but there's $20 million in industrial new property. Well, we all had the conversations, we know a lot of that is gonna be in that enterprise zone, and so I've got to kind of, I don't wanna say finagle, but try to figure out what of that new property is actually going to exist as new property, and make sure that we're levying to collect off of that new property, because our taxpayers, they're capped at 3.5. So our current taxpayers, I can't increase that by more than 3.4%, which is CPI, that's our tax cap. But our levy may be 6 or 7% because of this new property that's coming in. Those are the people that will see that increase where that levy is. Whereas our current taxpayers, even if we approve a levy that's 6%, they're going to see 3.4% for our current ones. But that increased EAV is definitely the component to be looking at as well.
And I think that's where at the educational part is really important, because I disagree with what you said, is that when people look at the levy, they're gonna look at it 2 ways. They look at the levy percentage and they look at the total dollar levy.
Yep.
So the levy percentage may be higher or maybe lower or the same
Yep.
or whatever, but they're gonna look at that levy amount. And it's nice to distinguish, as you did, is that, well, looking at that levy amount, this is why that levy amount is higher than the 3.4% that last year's amount was.
And as a precursor, I'll give you a little bit, I plan on presenting you with a levy that will reduce our levy rate. So we always hear the mill rate, we're about 5.5 right now. I expect to have that under 5 for this year. So although the EAVs went up, I'm hoping that I will be bringing you a levy that will be less than that current rate for the tax rate. Now, as you indicated, assessments went up, so what they actually are gonna pay will probably still go up, but the district will probably be asking for a lower rate. And so that's kind of your precursor to get you excited about the next meeting.
Because people won't pay any attention to what that number of percentages.
No.
Yes.
They're gonna
What's
pay
their
attention
dollars,
to what that dollar sign
Yeah.
is.
Dollars, yeah.
D100 schools.
Yeah.
Yes, 100%, and that is the
That's
component
the
of
dollar.
education that, you know, I make my shameless plug here for Goal 5, is, you know, one of the components I'm working on this year is meet the CFO or talk to the CFO, and talk through, what does the levy look like, what does the budget look like, and how does that relate? Because I know when you get your tax bill and you see School District 100 and they're getting all of that money, we had the Chamber Leadership Committee in here today for Academy, and we talked through that process, is that I know, as a taxpayer as well, it's hard to look at that and see that's where it's going, but, you know, the components of actually understanding what it costs to run a district and get some information, that's one of those components I'm trying to get out there for that education, so people can understand it a little bit more.
So feedback, thoughts, additional information, are we on target with what we've got here? I would love, if we think this is where we wanna be, to put together something for you for the next board meeting. Tom, go ahead.
Couple questions.
Yeah,
So
go.
on here, the Perry numbers on this list,
Mm-hmm.
what does that equate to is that basically equal to tier 2? Is that
So
what that's-
the initial scope here, this 2 million that you see on the front
Correct.
page,
Yes,
is tier 1,
that's
okay?
tier 1.
But
That's what I thought.
on the second page, we're bringing Perry all the way to tier 2, okay?
Got it.
So, and that's the diagram that you see as well in the attachments there at the board meeting. You can see what that means at Perry and what that would look like. And again, the hope there is that, the plan is that we would not need to move students out in order to make the changes that need to be made here.
Got it.
Good question. Other questions, points of clarification?
So you gray area the Kishwaukee,
Yes.
which I get. What depending what we decide to do with Kishwaukee, I mean, are any of these things we have to do? You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
If we're making money on it and we think we might get rid of it in a year
Mm-hmm.
or two, then I don't know, how do we decide what we really wanna do and don't wanna do?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes total sense, and we've had a lot of conversations about this, Mr.
You
Winters.
know what I mean? It's like,
Yes.
but we're making
do.
money, right?
Yep.
So,
However, at some point, we're gonna have to invest or not
The
invest.
deferred maintenance will catch up to you.
Yes,
You will have.
And,
Yeah.
and
Or
our
you have.
students go to Kishwaukee.
correct.
Yeah, and that time is closer than we realize. We had a boiler scare last week where we thought we lost the boiler. And it's a steam boiler, and it is as old as a building is. And it, again, there are different scenarios. You can say, okay, let's take the steam boiler out, put a new steam boiler in, or is that the time to convert to hot water, which is, that's where all your energy savings are. A lot of difference, you know, that's the nice thing about the needs assessment. It is broken up for how deep we wanna go into it. But I do think that sooner than later, if we do keep the building, I don't think I'm going out on a limb here. I think that boiler probably has a year, maybe 2 at the best. We are limping that one along.
And if the boiler is having that much trouble, the piping infrastructure is going to be similar as far as age and.
How long is the negotiated contract we have for the current occupants on the lease at Kish?
It will go through next year.
And if we were to complete these projects, do we have any sense of, would that be just enough to keep us rentable, or would we be able to consider the idea that with these enhancements, we might actually be able to increase the rent?
I mean, I think you can always look at increasing the rent. I think they're paying a decent rent amount.
Yeah,
But
well, I'm just wondering if that, you know, does this just make them maybe want to sign again? Like, look, we're not signing again if some of these things, the boiler that's limping along, and some of these other things, is that, you know, we don't have a line of people waiting for that space, right? So keeping them happy if we're gonna re-rent to them or release to them. Does doing these things, let me rephrase the question. Have we gotten any pushback from them on, hey, maybe we could do something to the building here? It's starting to, have more issues on a, monthly basis.
They have not said anything
Okay.
to me. They put in their work orders, we go out there and we fix them. I will say, these are the bare minimum projects that need to be done, that have to be done. If you've been out there, I mean, we're talking, the parking lot needs to be redone, it is correct, the sidewalks are not. I mean, we could definitely invest a lot of money into Perry and make it very desirable.
Kishwaukee.
Kishwaukee, I'm sorry, which one?
Perry.
No, I did not mean that. I apologize.
I thought we were still on Kishwaukee.
No, we are putting money
We already
into
did that to
Perry.
Perry once.
But for Kishwaukee, I mean, this is just the bare, these are the things that need to be done sooner than later. They're not going to object to do it, and there's been no conversation that they don't want to continue to rent. That we said that we would make sure that we gave them at least a full year's notice if we were going to not pursue letting them renew the lease. If we were going to get rid of the property, offer to sell it, they would obviously have an option to pursue that. But they would like a year to plan. So that was kind of stemming this conversation for this year, is making a decision so that they could have adequate time to work through that process.
So what is the timeline with which we would expect administration to want an answer from the board on what they want to do with Kishwaukee?
Well, we, now would be great, but sort of what our thinking was we wanted to get through this initial scope piece, find out where the board was on that, and not get too distracted by Kishwaukee in the immediate. That being said, once that decision, I think, is made on this years 1 through 3, we're going to fairly shortly thereafter, as Mr. Winters indicated, there's some pretty significant needs that could come to pass sooner than later. We'll need to walk through this and figure out what those next steps are.
I think to me, in the short term on the Kishwaukee part, is looking at it is, let's just say for the sake of argument, we are making our $300-some thousand a year ahead on that. You look at this project right here, in 5 years, we'd be money ahead. So if we invested all that 1.4 million or whatever, would it be, I mean, we'd be even after 5 years, of the value of the buildings and properties worth the same as it is now, if we didn't do anything. So if we actually did that and put $1.5 million in it, or we'd have a more valuable piece of property that we'd have more interest in. I mean, if we think, if they're not really interested in moving now, 5 years may not be that long to assume they would still want to stay there. So if we did that, and let's just say they decided to move, in my theory, we may not be any worse off than we are now anyway.
I would just remind the fact that this is just one aspect of the project. There's a lot more work, so the 5 years will get us even on this project, but not the other work that needs.
Right, but right now, this is all
It's all we're
that's
looking
being
at.
put in front of us, right? I mean, bigger, deeper cuts through other projects out there, but these are what would rise to the level of being
Tier
Keeping
1.
the
urgent to
facility
emergent,
occupied.
right, as necessary. And what was their length of lease this time? What was the lease they took this time? Was it 5 years this
I think
time?
it was 5. That was 5. I can't remember for sure.
So while Joanne's looking at that, I guess what I'm hearing is really, and my viewpoint on this too, is if we do these, it's gonna enhance, ultimately enhance the property value, I would imagine. Because, when you're putting an HVAC system at 1.1 million in there, obviously is gonna have an impact on the property value therefore. Which, again, if it increases the property value for that building, does create the potential for us to then seek higher rents, I guess, for that matter.
It was a 3-year.
3 years.
As far as your return on investment, the thing you have to keep in mind is it's not your house. So you can have 100 people that are interested in your house. the number of people that are interested in that building is a very limited number.
I agree.
So you're not gonna get dollar for dollar on your investment. It is why, if you wanted to sustain operations there and raise rent and still generate that money, then you need to put a consistent renovation plan and maintenance upgrade plan in place for that building. Probably over 10 years, because 5 years is probably not gonna get you everything that needs to be done. But if you think that, hey, you're gonna get dollar for dollar back, you won't, because there's a limited number of people that would have an interest in using that facility. It's not like a general strip commercial space or someone's home where you've got a lot of more interest pool to the facility.
No, I agree, and I didn't dispute that, I was just arguing that even if we sold it for $1, like tomorrow, and we sold it for $1 5 years from now,
Right.
we would have recouped all we put into it in those 5 years, we would be even anyway.
You could have at least
With a
broken even
profit
on
made
that.
on
That's,
that.
I wasn't
Yeah.
talking about profit, I was
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And if we made more, then we made a little more, we did. And,
right.
It seems like we need, at some point in the very near future, if not now, to decide, if we know that there's more money after this, probably good to know that more, because I know we could piece it out of a variety of places, but is it 3 times this, is it another 6 to 7 million, 10
It's,
million?
I believe it's
Remember that
6.7.
number
I thought the number I had was a little
Do
over
you have,
6.
Yeah,
It was like
you've got the,
Yeah, I
yep,
thought
right
it was
there.
like a little over 6, but,
Yeah,
We have that information.
Yeah, it was like
I
six.
think it was like around
6
6 million
Yeah.
Yeah.
total.
so then we have to ask ourselves at some point, as I look at it from my chair, I'm asking myself, is 1.4 worth it if we're not gonna spend the other 6?
Correct.
Their
And
total
so-
in the project was 6.7 in last year's dollars.
Minus, so with this 1.4 out of it.
No,
That's
that's
all.
including the
Got
1.4.
it.
Take the 1.4 out of
so it'd
that.
be another
Yeah.
5.
Another 5, yeah.
Another 5, basically, a little less, but.
But
In dollars from last
Close
year.
In dollars
And
from
we've
last
got
year.
another
Correct.
year with them,
Correct.
and so I think the need is probably fast approaching, more likely maybe for the next board. But I don't know, I feel like if we're gonna spend 1.4, we would have to hope that we would see a path to spend the full 6.7. And I don't honestly think I would be at a place, if I was making a decision now, that I'd wanna spend 6.7.
Yeah.
So I probably wouldn't spend the 1.4, cause I wouldn't wanna spend the 6.7. That's just one person's interpretation right this second. Cause I just don't see, I don't think we wanna be in the business of being a landlord forever, although the program is well attended and utilized by our students, there's value in the program for sure, I'm not negating that. But I guess that's my,
Well, and we would certainly have the option of seeing if someone wanted to purchase Kishwaukee. I mean, that is certainly a process we could follow, and we can bring some more information on that. Again, we, with some intentionality, did not bring that forward because we wanted to keep the focus on this initial scope of the board. But we certainly can bring forth some additional information.
but if the
On that.
scare gets a violent shove into a replacement, which could happen any day, right? When you get this far down the road with these industrial boilers and things like that, a scare could become look, we have to spend the money because
Correct.
there's people operating and we have a legal obligation to keep that building operational.
Correct.
So I'm saying, I think we can't kick that too far down the road.
Correct.
If we're gonna evaluate not doing that, because we could be at, well, we're replacing it to the tune of 1.1 million now because
Yep.
it's unrepairable and kaput.
I think we are on the same page, Lisa. Absolutely.
So I think knowing what our options would be to sell would be something good to begin to explore, just to have, you
Yep,
know,
and, yep,
for grins
absolutely.
and-
And we do have that appraisal done, so we do know what we could anticipate, and we know that we would approach our current renters and see if that was something they wanted to do. So we are prepared to, if the board is prepared, we are prepared to move on that, so.
Yeah, it's just my opinion on it, but.
Yep. So we'll put that information back together for the October board meeting as well. Okay. Other questions or points of clarification?
So,
Yep,
one question.
yeah.
October board meetings in 2 weeks? Or 3 weeks?
Yes.
Little less, but yeah. Week from Monday.
The 21st?
It's 2 weeks from Monday.
Oh, 2 weeks still from Monday. Oh,
This-
10, 18.
And I've mentioned this before, when I go through this for the two high schools, I keep getting feedback that there's other things that they need or would like to have in the plan that I don't see in the plan. I think, is it possible that we could meet with some of the administration of those schools to get their feedback, you know, to the board directly?
Are you talking about here for the tier one, or are you talking about
This is for the
the
first 3
overall
years.
facilities plan?
Overall facilities plan.
Oh, well, yes, but you're not talking about this year's 1 through 3, you're thinking about the
Well, I
longer
don't
term
know.
scope?
If it's something they feel they want that badly, we should probably have some of them in years 1 through 3, right?
Well,
Well, we
Or
can,
at least be discussing it.
Or at least
maybe.
be discussing it, yes.
I mean, we can certainly discuss it, so this was really just based on the absolute highest priority. Because you have to remember that we've got another $83.3 million that is a part of that master facilities plan. And if you go back to that timeline that we went through in terms of years 4 through 10, those high school projects are coming up in those next years to get them to tier 2. That would be the natural time to be having that conversation of, okay, what does tier 2 look like? Which of these projects are the right projects? Where are we going to invest? As opposed to moving them into these mission critical pieces that absolutely need to be done.
Unless they're asserting that these are mission critical pieces. I don't know, I know, I'm not hearing, that's something they should probably let administration know then.
I
Is-
agree.
Yeah.
And I get mixed messages on it all the time. And I've had these discussions.
So I
with
would guess, I
Joanne,
would just say,
And
you know,
so, I
they,
mean,
if you feel that there's mission critical things at any building, not just
Correct.
Perry, or, I'm sorry, what did we just say, the high schools, then you probably should paint or get off the ladder at this point and say, okay, here's the additional things that we think we see we need. And I would say that that has, a pretty urgent time clock if we're looking at the possibility of voting on this in a couple of weeks.
Yes.
Joanne, can you, or I don't know, Sean, can you refresh our recollection as to how the facilities needs assessment was compiled in the first place? Like how the information came to be in that book that's sitting in front of you,
I can do that.
or Steve?
I can do that, because we did it. So that would be my question, is my first question would be, is it things that they want? Are they programmatic things? Because we didn't look at any of that. The master plan looked at opportunities for collaboration spaces or different things. Our assessment was a deeper dive than a health life safety survey. So a health life safety survey is looking for things that will qualify for health life safety or our code violations or change of a space from a storage room to a classroom or from a classroom back to a storage room, whatever it might be. The assessment was a deeper dive into all the maintenance and operational issues with the building. So building envelope, roof, walls, masonry, windows, sealants, all that kind of stuff. All the mechanical, plumbing, electrical, fire alarm, all the equipment. What's its lifespan expected to be? Is it operating properly, or do we have boilers that are a year from being done? So the assessment was that. We went into every physical space. We took pictures of every physical space. I was responsible for all the exterior work, so I did all the outside exteriors. Andrew and the engineers did all the interiors. We also did also meet with each custodial representative at the building to say, hey, tell us if you know, hey, we have leaks in this hallway or this classroom. So when we're on the roof, we can look at, hey, those areas, they say we're getting leaks here. Is there something evident in that area? So it was all about the integrity of the building structure and the systems that operate it. We did not look from an assessment standpoint at, gee, you could split this classroom and make 2 good group rooms, or these 2 could be combined into collaboration space. That was more the master plan side of things. The assessment is really nuts and bolts on everything on the building. Does that make sense?
yes.
And everything on this list, like most everything on this list, is things that decide whether we have school or not, or a safety issue, access control, roofing, parking lots, HVAC. I guess, the only question I would have is if we take more on, we're gonna have to take some things out. and taking those things out.
Or
I would
expand the initial tier budget. I mean, I'm not saying we're looking to do that, but I'm just saying, we either have to shrink this list and make room for other things, or we have to be willing to spend more money in tier one.
Yeah,
Correct.
and if you, yep.
That is correct.
Correct. And it's been a year since we did the assessment now, so other things could have cropped up.
Yes.
And
Well, they're
we're
gonna
not
have to say
perfect,
what
so
they are.
if we missed something, we might have missed a leak somewhere that wasn't evident at the time. Or it's something that's happened since the assessment a year ago.
And what would be the procedure for an administrator at the building level if something did come up that should have appeared on this that didn't? Do they talk to Sean? Do they talk to Joanne?
Well, so what we did a few layers of things. So every year we do a needs and wants with the building administrators. But in addition to that, we compiled the principal priority list that you have seen in your board update and are addressing those principal priorities as per the information in that board update. Certainly, it's very easy for us to go back to the principals. I mean, we were at Leadership Council just this past Tuesday saying, you know, this is what's happening, these are the projects, this is the timeline. Most of what's going to happen in your buildings that isn't the most urgent level of priority, you're gonna see in years 4 through 10. They saw this list on, Tuesday morning. Yes, they saw this list on Tuesday morning. We had an opportunity to get feedback and questions, so they are definitely aware of this and engaged in this process. But if there's something that is out there that we need to know, I guess we need to know what that is and who we need to follow up with.
Well, I mean, I'll give you a couple of examples, because I think part of me would like to, because we get caught in the middle somehow. I know it's not a good place to be, and some people disagree with why we're caught in the middle, and that's fine. And I'm fine with that too, is that they'll tell us things, and then I do think there has to be collaboration, because we get asked, well, who is it? Who told you that? You know, and that's a fair question. I'm not arguing that at all. But I think the problem is, they're voicing a concern about this stuff, and they're looking at this as last chance for 5 years kind of thing, because we do 1 to 3 years, we go 4 to 6, that means they're never gonna see it till 5, if they're lucky. So I think they're looking at stuff like this, and I'll just give you a couple examples. One example would be the bleachers at BHS. Another example would be the stuff underneath the stadium at BHS. There's 2 examples. I mean, the restrooms and all that other stuff is
Okay.
pretty bad.
All right.
And
I,
go ahead.
I met with Mr. Booker and kind of went through the process, and I want to reiterate that every budget cycle, every building administrator gets a budget worksheet and a needs and wants sheet, and they submit those to me for consideration. And I showed those sheets to Mr. Booker, and the things that are being talked about, some of the things that are being talked about are not coming across on this needs and wants. And so a lot of those things had already been addressed, and, you know, we talked about
But
lighting and.
that's what I don't understand. It's like there's like this
But if they're
disconnect.
not sending it to us, I can't get it on the list. I can't read people's minds, and so I need to know that information. And so, you know, and the needs assessment didn't take into account structures that don't exist. So, you know, I hear about stadium buildings and things like that. We can't, this was an assessment of current facilities, not what we want in the future. So if we want a stadium building, it can't be in this book because it didn't exist. I couldn't assess it. So I want to reiterate from Dr. Shug, and if there are things out there that people are wanting on a list, we need to know that. So I appreciate that they're reaching out to board members and to the, but I can't budget anything if I don't know where this is coming from.
Well, those two sound like more on the urgent or safety kind of whatever lanes. I don't know what some of the other things are, but I think it's just an important reminder to all of us here that we don't want to be vilifying board members or administration, right? Because people seek us out and share things, and then you think, well, in an advocacy role, I'm trying to pass that information along, and you get vilified, and then you sit here as administrators and you feel like, look, they're not telling us that, and you get vilified.
I'll be perfectly
So
honest.
in the end, they're gonna have to speak up and say the
to-
things that they want
to
or
Matt's
need at
point.
this point, or give us the authority to use their names.
Or
and-
use the process that's in place. You know, there's a process that's in place for all of this. It's not like we never ask the administrators what they want, what they need, and it is not effective at all for them to go directly to board members on the side. I just don't know what the, I mean, I'm not trying to vilify anyone, but everyone knows what the process is for these plans. And the way to get something on this list is not to bend the ear of a board member that you know.
And I do walk the buildings with the building principal and whoever in the building you want to walk through with my supervisors every month. And they do take us wherever they want to take us. It's not our show. This last paper here was the last one they filled out, 3 highest facility needs reported by sites. And a lot of these we've done, and a lot of these are on this right here for the first 3 years. There are some things on your, general aesthetic upgrades. What does that mean? There are things about, remove the portable classrooms. That's $140,000. Right now, I can put that money elsewhere. So we are working with what their feedback, and we are meeting with them monthly. And we do and will absolutely meet with them weekly, daily, whatever they need. That's why we're here.
And obviously, the needs of a principal at a building like Seth, what they want or need are going to be different than the principal of Perry. So that's why we don't treat everyone's wants and needs equally. That's why we had Steve do facilities assessment to prioritize the needs. And I mean, if the bleachers at BHS are unsafe and have become unsafe since this facilities assessment was done, okay, I guess someone should be notifying someone other than Mr. Zickert about that. But I don't think it's our. The process is not to complain to board members about wanting individual items on this list, and I think our administrators know that.
I think the problem though is that in the past, and I'll just give you I think Perry's a good example. Look how far we let Perry go before we decided to do anything. 2 other examples, easy examples, are the tennis courts and the track. I mean, those have been identified 4 years ago. And now we're spending 4 or 5-fold more than we would have back then. I mean, we could have patched those things for the next 30 years for what it's gonna cost us to fix it now. And I think those are examples where they look at and say, the system failed us back then.
And we did the facilities needs assessment, which we have never had before. This is the
That was the big
solution
part
to
of
that
the
problem.
Is that I needed to know where we were starting, because I wasn't here 4 years ago and I wasn't there. And so the needs assessment was what I had asked this board to pursue, so I could see where we were and make a plan. I mean, that was the essence of what drove this. When Dr. Weisman was here, we started, we finally got it through and finished up. But that is what I needed to be able to develop the plan so that we're not doing that maintenance, and that we don't get into this situation again, that we have a guiding document that is very fluid. It will change. If the bleachers at the high school need to be replaced, and those are, we said there's gonna be things that pop up that we didn't say needed to be done for 3 or 4 years, that now it's eminent, it has to be done. You're still going to have that, which makes this that fluid document, so we can do those projects.
Well, and we will reach out again to administration to clarify if there are needs that we are unaware of
At all the schools.
at all the schools. We will again reach out and make sure that we have a plan for those. So I really believe that the administrators know how to access us. I mean, again, we spent time just on Tuesday having this conversation with them. But I do not want there to be any doubt that anybody's voice doesn't have the opportunity to be heard on this. So it is a significant investment. We want to get it right. And I will reach out again to them tomorrow and make sure that we have any information we need. Other thoughts, comments, questions, feedback, things you need clarity on?
What do you need from us in order to have something ready for the board to look at the October meeting?
I think that is an excellent question. What I would love to do is at our October 21st board meeting, bring forward this plan for years 1 through 3 for board approval. Again, you would just be approving a plan, not any of these individual projects, which are gonna continue to come through the board. But that's gonna allow us to really start the process of going out to bid and following this timeline that we've got here. I would love to have that at that October 21st board meeting. I would also love to know what you want us to prepare so we can look at years 4 through 10, which is really that next part of the scope. So if we had a resolution to approve years 1 through 3, that would be, I think, just a really excellent commitment by this board to put the investment where it needs to be and really start this process. I think that would be phenomenal. And then anything you need from us to start really playing out that what do years 4 through 10 look like, and if we want to be thinking about building a referendum for that, or if we want to be looking at other funding options, we need to know what that charge is going to be, and we will move forward with it.
So I'm hearing you say that voting, creating whatever we would do in order to affirm the plan as it exists now, this first 32 million roughly.
Yes.
Every one of those projects is still going to come forward for a vote.
Anything that's over $35,000,
Right.
yes.
So, I mean, I guess I would feel prepared to do that and say, I mean, all it is a plan, right?
That's all
I mean,
it is.
So I just feel like it's, I guess if we have to vote on it, we have to vote on it, but, you know, that the expenditures could come in too high or too low, or a new board in whatever composition it exists could decide those aren't their priorities, and they could choose not to go forward with that. So I think it's maybe an unfortunate time, right, to be in a place to be having to do all this and, you know, get a new board up to speed and want to be starting most of these things next year, and hopefully they're ready to dig in and, you know, have some proposals to vote on for early next summer so projects can start and understand the gravity of it. It's a lot. Like, I've never been a part of a project like this while on the board, coming, you know, to the end of the, you know, the term, so, but I could affirmatively say I would be prepared to vote up or down on the plan as it is presented at an October meeting.
At what point do we vote on the resolution for the transfer on the fund balance?
Well, I would be looking for probably a consensus or a straw poll to say, yes, you want me to draft that, because that will require the 30-day amended budget hearing, and we'd have to have another hearing, just like we did in June when I did the amended budget. We would have to do that process, and that resolution would be part of an amended budget. So if we continued this conversation and there was a draw that we wanted to look at that $10 million one-time transfer, I would be asking as early as the next board meeting on, do you want me to start preparing that, which would then be presenting you at the earliest hour. If we didn't do this until October board meeting, it would probably be our December board meeting where we would have a budget hearing and adopt that amended budget, because I would need to give that 30-day examination period.
But I think that would be, the absolute appropriate cadence, would be for us to adopt that plan, have the opportunity to work through business services, and then bring that resolution forward in December. And again, that would be this board really taking some significant steps to put this in motion. To Mrs. Wickham's point, a new board might struggle with some of these pieces, but I think a new board would find some confidence in knowing that this board spent 2 years thinking about this and putting a plan into place. I would be very hopeful that a new board would respect some of that direction. And I think that they, in all likelihood, would. This was not a careless, fly-by-night process. This has been a very thoughtful, lengthy process.
I mean, from my point of view, if we if we did fund transfer and we did the life safety part, for what the life safety would qualify for,
Yep.
I'm comfortable looking at that. Anything beyond that, I would be not as comfortable with.
Okay, but that's years 1 through
Right,
3,
I get it.
as is, I mean, I just wanna know, I wanna clarify, I wanna
But
make sure I
even-
understand.
I wouldn't be comfortable with it even if we were using more than that. If we did higher bonding or less.
Okay,
less-
use the
less-
DSED bonds.
Right, I would not be comfortable with that.
But you would be comfortable with us doing the transfer for fund balance
And the life
and doing the
safety.
life safety, so the projects as we have them spelled out here with the transfer for fund balance. All right, very good.
Well, I guess Joanne would be helpful if you got a consensus tonight on that. Because I also would be comfortable with the 10 million of life safety bonds and the 10 million transfer
Okay,
with that, so. I don't know if that
that
helps
is,
you
Right.
with what you needed to plan for, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, then I can definitely begin, working after the October meeting. If we adopt this plan, then I would obviously start engaging, Bob and Ann from PMA and Steeple to look at a schedule for health life safety bonds, how to look at some of those projects and bringing forward, because that would also require some board action. Then bringing that resolution for the fund, transfer in December with a preliminary look at it in November.
Yeah. I mean, none of these projects are gonna get any cheaper.
No.
So, yep,
all right,
sounds good to me.
all right.
I
I,
have consensus on that. I mean, I've heard
I-
from Matt, I've heard from Jorge.
what about everybody else?
Yeah.
Everyone else?
I'm comfortable.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure.
no, I think that is, I think that's fantastic. I really appreciate the board's support on this. I just really think your investment in this is going to pay off for a very long time, and I appreciate your willingness to move forward with that. That doesn't give me the information I really need on years 4 through 10, but I can start working on what we can lay out for you there. Do you want to just focus on this for the October board meeting?
Yeah,
And
I
maybe
do.
give us some feedback
I don't
and
really
then,
wanna take on 4 through 7 yet.
okay, so let's get through this. Then we'll, come back in November and look at years 4 through 10. Does that seem, that gives us a little bit of breathing room and, lets us get through this first step?
Sounds good.
All right. I like a little breathing room too. I think that sounds fantastic. Thank you, Mrs. Whitcomb, for that. So, all right, fantastic. That's all I need then for tonight.
All right, anything anyone else wants to offer for the good of the cause? If not, motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Meeting adjourned.